When I first attached the camera to the wing of my aircraft, it was the GoPro Hero 5, but I quickly replaced that with the GoPro Max, a 360-degree camera, which is really versatile, allows me to pan in front of the aircraft, behind the aircraft, gives me those very cool panning shots as I'm taking off looking back at the runway. But because this is an old camera and it has a very small sensor, and because this is a 360-degree camera, neither of these give me a particularly sharp and professional looking image. So recently I decided to purchase the Sony RX0 2, a newer camera with a much bigger sensor than the Hero 5. It should give me a much better picture. I want to test these two cameras side by side. The GoPro Hero 5 is a really affordable option and it's a great camera. It records in 4K, but I haven't really ever tested these two side by side. Now, why am I comparing a camera which is basically 4 years old, especially when GoPro are said to be releasing the GoPro Hero 9 anytime soon? In fact, this month it's been cited for release in September, to the Sony RX0 2. Well, the reason is because the sensor size in this hasn't changed from the GoPro Hero 5 to where we are now with the 8. And it doesn't look like there's going to be a bigger sensor in the 9 either. And what I'm really looking at today is not so much stabilization and audio, but I'll touch on those, but is the image quality. I just want a camera that I can bolt to the wing of the aircraft, that I can set to record, which gives me the best possible pictures of what's going on outside the aircraft in order to make my YouTube videos. But of course, the only problem is with all of this, Melbourne is still in lockdown. We're still not allowed to leave the house for more than 1 hour a day. We're not allowed to go further than 5 kilometers away from our house, and the aircraft and the airport where it's located are a lot more than 5 kilometers in that direction. So I need an alternative mode of transport to test these two cameras on, something which I can bolt the cameras to and just see how it looks when I'm maybe going along some bumpy surfaces. And
we take you to the Hotel Martin Inn in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
Now what I've done as well is I've set both camera modes to their default settings. I know in the GoPro you can use things like Pro Tune. I haven't done any of that today. Both cameras are both just set to their default settings. So straight out the box, this is what it would look like. Now, I don't want to test the microphones on these things necessarily, because if you're putting it on the wing of the aircraft, you're probably not going to be worried too much about the sound. But if you are, this is what it sounds like on the GoPro Hero 5. And then this is what it sounds like on the Sony RX0 Mark II. They've both got internal microphones. The Sony is supposed to be an option for a vlogging camera as well. This is going backwards. So now you can hear what they're like in the wind. This is the GoPro 5 in the wind. And this is the Sony RX0 Mark II in the wind. I'm sure they both sound horrible. I'll probably edit this whole thing out. Alright, let's go home and check the footage, see what those two look like. Just as a side note as well, it's really nice being outside. If you are in Melbourne and you've got the annoying news that we are going to be in lockdown again for another couple of weeks, I feel for you, you're not alone. I feel the same. Seem to be a few more people on the streets in Melbourne today, I think because it's getting warmer now. It's spring in Melbourne now. If you're watching this in the Northern Hemisphere, I know you're going into the colder autumn months, but it's spring down here, which is great, but it's also not great with the virus because more people are outside, I think, nowadays, because the days are getting longer and the temperatures are getting warmer. Tram tracks. You got to go across them like 90 degrees across the tram tracks. Otherwise, anyone who's cycled in Melbourne before has at one point put their bicycle tyre into the tram tracks and okay, well, after reviewing that footage back here in the office, it's kind of clear that there are two obvious conclusions you can draw. The first one is, yes, I know I need a haircut, and if anyone mentions that in the comments, I will ban you from this channel. The second thing is obviously the picture quality then, as you can see, the Sony is a lot better in my opinion than what you're getting off the GoPro Hero 5. Yes, of course, again, I'll say it, it's a newer camera, I get that. But the biggest sensor that you have in here compared to the one in the GoPro, the color science that Sony have compared to the color that comes straight off the bat in GoPro with no color correction. Just the details you get in the 4K I think is better than the 4K that comes off the older GoPros. There are a couple of things though that the GoPro still does perform better than the Sony for. One is it's a much wider angle that you get off the GoPro camera than you do from the Sony. So if you're using it as an action camera and you want to capture more of, you know, your environment, your surroundings, maybe if you're skateboarding, surfing, that kind of thing, you're still probably going to be looking at the GoPro rather than the Sony. But for my purposes, and for some of you guys watching, if you are looking to put a camera on the wing if you're playing, you don't need that wide an angle. The other thing though is the microphone, and the internal mic on the GoPro seemed to perform a lot better, especially in wind, than the one on the Sony did. But again, if you're putting it on the wing if you're playing, that doesn't matter. Both cameras have a screen at the back which you can use to navigate through the menu systems. The one on the GoPro is really, really simple to use and it's all touchscreen. The one on the Sony is really, really complex to use and is not touchscreen. But at the end of the day, they both kind of do the same job. There is one big difference with the screen that you get on the Sony compared to the GoPro though, and that is, so if you want to use this as a vlogging camera, and just one final consideration, all to do with how this thing would be mounted on your aircraft. You can probably see how I attached the GoPro in its kind of skeleton casing, but the Sony has screwed straight in. Now, newer GoPros don't have the requirement for one of these cases because they have the feet that actually come out the bottom, but there's no screw thread in the bottom. The Sony, on the other hand, actually does have, meaning that you can mount it directly onto something like the N-Flight cam mounts on your aircraft without having to use any kind of frame. Like with the GoPro Max, this is the metal frame that I got off eBay, which has got this screw at the bottom, and that screws directly into the N-Flight cam mount. The same would go for any GoPros, even the ones which have got the feet at the bottom, because those are just plastic little bits that come out which you attach to the GoPro mount. I wouldn't rely on that. I'd want a metal frame that actually holds it onto the wing. The Sony has it all built in, so you could, in theory, screw that directly onto your mount on the wing, and you don't need a cage or a bracket that sits around the outside of it. So I am going to replace the GoPro with the Sony RX0 Mark II on the wing of the aircraft next time I go flying. I'll put it on the wing so you can see what the footage looks like when we're actually up in the air. The only thing I can't guarantee to you is exactly when that will be. It's looking like at least another 6 weeks at the moment.